Ow. Hey, the Hangout on Air is live. Welcome in, everyone. It is the Audible Live, the full crew back in action for this April 12th edition. And wow, we've got a lot to get to with, of course, the NFL draft 2 weeks away. 2 weeks from tonight, we'll be having our Audible Live Hangout. I will try to check in from Dallas as I will be at Jerry's World for the 2018 NFL draft. And Bloom, you'll be running the show and taking care of business like we always do on our draft hangouts on draft night.
Yeah, and lining up our normal, wonderful cavalcade of guests. And this is going to be a fun one because I think that we may know the number one pick. Maybe we won't know the number one pick, but then I think we'll have suspense. And it's going to be because of the quarterbacks. There's going to be a great release of energy when we see what happens, and then we have the rest of the first round. Lamar Jackson, a Patriot. So the suspense won't end, and I'm sure it will be spine tingling in Jerry World.
Oh, we got a lot to get to, that's for sure. And Matt Waldman, you're all over it with the rookie scouting portfolio. Listen, you got 2 weeks, right? And I know there's a lot of people. You get spring training, get baseball openers out of the way, and it was getting to the NBA playoffs. I know there's some people out there like warming up to the draft. Well, what better way to do that than the rookie scouting portfolio available at Matt Waldman, RSP.com. Matt, a couple weeks here where you get to stretch out a little bit, breathe a little bit.
You want to know how excited I am about the NFL draft, Cecil?
How excited are you?
Just for you, baby. Just for you.
Oh my goodness. Where did you get that? I want one of those.
I got it in the mail the other day from a little birdie. So okay. There we go. Yeah.
Well, little birdie's motorboat, and it's nice to get the rookie scouting portfolio to pour through that thing. Just the response, Matt, and how people react to you online, on Twitter, social networking, email, etc., about just how wonderful the rookie scouting portfolio is.
Well, it's been great, and I'm very fortunate to have, the readers that I do. And a lot of that, I can credit to you guys for having me on from the very beginning, and, the show that we put on and getting the chance to have exposure to a number of people, so, it's great to have readers who are intelligent, who want information that's at a level that's on a higher level and more detailed than what you may normally expect, in terms of everyday internet consumption. And I'm just fortunate that I found that niche of folks, and it feeds me and energizes me. So it's great to be able to do this, and it's been nice that some of those people do include even non-fantasy folks. I love the fantasy groups for sure. That's where we all started, but it's nice when you have some folks who are media and in the league, or and folks who've played that like the work you do and give you feedback, because it's validating that folks who are doing this as a profession recognize what you do.
You are missing out if you don't have the rookie scouting portfolio. So get it, Matt Waldman, RSP.com, and get Dr. Jene Bramel. He's got what you need. And Dr. Jene, welcome back, my friend.
Thank you. More of you and less of me is usually a good thing. But I'm glad to be back.
Glad to have you back, as always. Glad to be in my new digs. If it was daylight, I'd take you guys outside and show you the side of the mountain. Anyway, we will get to that later on in this program. About Dr. Jene, first and foremost, Andrew Luck's not throwing a football. He's throwing, but not like a tennis ball or a Nerf ball or something. Your thoughts here, as we are in the middle of April, basically, and Luck isn't back to throwing a NFL regulation football.
I think there's two ways to look at this. One is, let's not get worried about it in April. We got a lot of good information over the offseason that suggests that he made enough recovery where they weren't in a hurry to do any sort of surgery, whether it was to the biceps tendon or something else about the shoulder. And I think that's a good thing, knowing what we knew as we went into November and December, which was very little. And there was some concern whether or not he'd need more surgery and what that might mean, and whether or not his long-term in his career would be something that could be affected. So, I think that's a good thing. I think that there's, as we said this time last year, well, not really this time last year, it was more June or July thing, where there's no really reason for the Colts to want to push him. And they may as well allow him to continue to do the core strengthening he needs to do, continuing to build up some arm strength, rather than risk a setback that might put him to a situation where they're concerned. They may as well do as much as they can to make sure that biceps tendon is healed. But by the same token, what are we now, 15 months where he's not thrown a football for any length of time without proving that he's able to do so without having some sort of pain in the shoulder. So I even though there was a little bit of a hint maybe from Chris Ballard that suggested that he'd be able to do something in OTAs, I don't know that that's an expectation. If that happens, that's great. If he's doing something in individual drills and throwing to receivers with a real football or the Duke or whatever he's been calling it, then I think that's awesome. But I think what the target is going to be, is he going to be ready for mini camp? Definitely is he going to be ready for training camp? And hopefully we're not having this discussion as we did in June and July last year about whether or not we're going to be thinking about PUP or not. Is if that's the case, if he's not throwing a football soon, or there's some sort of any hint of a setback at all, that's going to be a huge deal for his career. And I think what I wrote last week was that the trigger for me here is things kind of went off the rails last year when he stopped talking to the media, and it was left to Jim Irsay and Chris Ballard and Chuck Pagano to try to parse who was doing what and where Luck was and all that sort of stuff. And that happened towards the end of June last year. And he's, his interviews are goofy, but they're at least there. He's talking to the media. He seems optimistic about things. It's a totally different tone than what we heard as the offseason progressed last year. So I'm choosing not to be too concerned, other than, obviously you must be concerned that it's been 15 months, but I'm choosing to be optimistic that progress is still being made because he's avoided surgery so far, and they're allowing him to continue to progress in this throwing protocol. And as we said last year, it's very much a 6 to 8 week kind of start to finish thing when he finally gets cleared to throw the football a little bit. And hopefully that happens soon, and we'll see when he's back on the field.
Gee, I'm reserving. I want this to not count as my question, but I want to follow up a little bit on Andrew Luck, and then I want to ask you about Cam Meredith.
Okay.
Because a few new things we learned when he did talk, and as you said, and I've advised people that he's talking is maybe one of the things to take away from a more positive angle. But Stephen Holder said that one of the things Andrew Luck admitted in a vague way was that there might have been more impact from his decision to play hurt in 2015-16. This is a bigger factor in his issues than anyone has really admitted, from what I've been told. And then he also alluded to maybe trying to come back too fast and skip steps in his rehab. How do these new variables add into the picture of, will he be Chad Pennington or will he be Andrew Luck?
I don't think there's much question that continuing to play through this when there was some shoulder instability probably didn't help things at all. No, he didn't end up having a shoulder dislocation, but that shoulder was probably moving. There was a lot more inflammation that was in there. Again, I'm not the orthopedic surgeon or anything like that, but there was discussion about, should he be shut down? Should he be allowed to play the following year? I mean, they weren't allowing him to throw really at any point the year after the injury. They were limiting his reps, and yeah, I thought he looked pretty good toward the end of 2015 or 16, whatever it was. But I don't think there's much question that was a little bit of an issue. Whether or not he tried to accelerate steps in his rehab, I don't know. If Holder said that may be possible, but I don't know that caused much of a setback. Hopefully, invoking the name Chad Pennington is not prescient as far as what's going to happen there. I think that I don't think we're going to see a noodle-armed Andrew Luck. I don't think that's going to be the case. He may not have the arm strength that he once did, but I think I think it's reasonable to assume that there's going to be enough there where it's not going to be where Luck is going to be limited about what types of routes he can throw and what he can do. And the type of player that Luck is, he's not necessarily hyper accurate like Drew Brees or throwing with the clear anticipation of a Tom Brady or somebody like that. But I think Luck can get away with a 90% situation with arm strength if that's what it ends up being. And by 90%, I mean just a little bit less than what he's had before. So I think there were some rumblings as soon as you heard that it was a subluxation issue. Throwing shoulder or otherwise, if there's instability in the shoulder, that's not something that you can necessarily just strengthen away, because what happened is he needed to have his labrum repaired. That's not something that can be strengthened. So, and you're looking at arthritis and shortened careers, and I'm sure it did not end up at all the way they had hoped. I thought he probably hoped that he'd be able to play through it, and then I think he hoped that he'd have enough arm strength to get through it the second year, and just didn't prove to be the case.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. So Cam Meredith. Sorry, Matt, but I won't belabor this too much. No, Cam Meredith. We can get into how the Bears and Ryan Pace handled the restricted free agent tender, and that in and of itself is an interesting discussion. But when it came right down to it, they didn't want to match a pretty modest deal from the Saints. They didn't want to commit the $1 million extra to keep him from getting offer sheets. Rich Campbell, I think it was, wrote about how this had to do with the state of his knee, or at least we should conclude that. He said that as early as October of last year, that they were not writing his name in the plans for this year in ink, is how he put it. And Cam Meredith said this week that he doesn't have a timetable for his return. What should we read anything into this? Or maybe should we just read into it that Ryan Pace doesn't know what he's doing?
Well, let's see how things go. So that was a little bit of a change. Throughout the offseason, there really wasn't any indication that there were some rehab concerns with Meredith. Now, it was more than, and we knew that from just watching the injury, it was more than just a single ACL ligament issue there. He's got the MCL involved in too. And oftentimes we'll hear about the ligaments when we get to these multi-type injuries there. But, it doesn't mean that we're not missing a cartilage issue or something else that's going on there that they were aware of and thought it might take a little bit longer to rehab. So I think it's interesting that it's come out, and whether or not it was leaked by one party or another, that maybe he's not as far along in his rehab as you would expect. But these, when you have more than one injury there, they tend to, you don't necessarily think of it as an 8 to 9 month injury. And since it was a September situation, he was going to be pushing it for training camp anyway. And you would hope that we hear enough good things in the next 2 or 3 months that Meredith's not a guy that's going to start on the PUP list. But this is New Orleans, and I think that, with that offense and what we've seen Meredith been able to do in the past in his limited time when he's been healthy, if he is close to healthy by the time he's able to build up a little bit of rapport with Drew Brees, I don't think you'd worry about him as much as maybe if he was stuck with a lesser quarterback and a lesser offense.
So, Gene, I'm looking at your report on Carson Wentz and Deshaun Watson, and I'm seeing that, we have a reminder that Carson Wentz was injured in mid-December, a month and a half later than Deshaun Watson. He has an LCL repair as well as an ACL reconstruction. And you hear the Philadelphia Eagle medical staff say, oh, yeah, he'll be ready to play at the beginning of the season, and it's going to be safe for him to play, smooth recovery. Yeah, 100%. You hear Deshaun Watson, ACL reconstruction in early November, and they're like, well, we don't know how much he's going to participate in 7-on-7s. What's his recovery going to be like? So I know that they're different injuries, but Wentz seems more serious on the surface than Watson. So what are your thoughts about them at the this year, heading into this year, and how you kind of weigh that level of spin that may be presented to the media?
Well, there's no upside in having Deshaun Watson do much in 7-on-7 drills. They're going to put him in a no contact jersey and that sort of stuff. I just don't see him doing much in training camp because you can't guarantee that a player is going to be protected if something, a little bit of a fight or a false step or something like that, and somebody gets pushed into his knee. There's really no reason to expose him to anything that might even be close to contact. So I think you'll probably see him out there doing some individual drills and getting a lot of conditioning in. But by all accounts, his rehab is going well, and I wouldn't anticipate there being too much difficulty with him. It being a November injury, maybe he's not ready to be as mobile as he was pre-injury, but he's had ACL injuries before. He's going to have a sense of what the mental side of things is, and he's come back healthy enough to do what he was able to do in the first half of last year. So I wouldn't overreact too much about how much or how little he ends up doing during OTAs and possibly mini camp as well. The deal with Carson Wentz is because of the LCL injury, because it needed to be repaired and sewed back together. He was in a brace for, I think, at least 6 weeks, and maybe it was a little bit longer. I don't remember exactly how long it was, but he limited range of motion for 6 additional weeks than a player like Watson or somebody else that had an isolated ACL reconstruction where they're trying within the first 48 hours to get some range of motion back in the knee to limit scarring, to improve and accelerate the rehab process. And that was not something that was prescribed for Wentz because of the additional surgery that he had, not the additional surgery, but the additional repair that he had during that surgery. And I think, Wentz, it's possible that he may be able to stand in the pocket and throw passes in week 1, but I think that's bordering on the optimistic side of things. And I don't think you're going to see Wentz do much outside the pocket. I don't think there's going to be design plays. I don't think you're going to scramble as we've seen him do over the past couple of years. I don't think that's a realistic ask at all. So maybe you get Carson Wentz back as a pocket quarterback for the first few weeks of the year and then see how he progresses after that. But I think I would be surprised, very surprised, if he wasn't on the PUP list to start training camp. And then the countdown starts from there. Is he going to be able to, he's probably not going to participate in any preseason games, but is he going to be in a good enough condition and mentally and physically ready to stand in the pocket and throw passes in week one, regardless if they don't move him out of the pocket? I don't know I don't think anybody can say that yet. It's still early enough in his rehab, knowing that it's only been 3 to 4 months here, maybe 4.5 months, to be able to make that determination. So I think we'll see Watson week one without too much limitation, but Wentz is definitely a much bigger question mark.
Go to footballguys.com and come get a taste of what we do. And of course, Dr. Jene Bramel and what he does in his injury rounds. The April updates available now at footballguys.com. We'll go one more time around the horn with Dr. Jene. Appreciate your time and all of us being back together. Dr. Jene, I just want to know, are you going to yell at Rob Gronkowski for using Alex Guerrero too? And now the reports about him being leaner and that, isn't this something that a guy with a history of back injuries kind of has to do?
Yeah.
Work on flexibility, all those sorts of things.
Yep. Core strength and flexibility makes a ton of sense.
Just don't join a cult.
Yeah. Whatever, the cult of Guerrero, yeah. It's worked out well for Tom Brady, no matter what you think about it, right? There's probably other reasons that Tom Brady have been successful, obviously. I think limiting Rob Gronkowski's inline tight end duties as far as blocking and putting stress on that lower back, where he's had a couple of levels where he's had discectomies now, is a reasonable thing to do. And they've made some additions there that may take the edge off of what they're needing him to do from a blocking standpoint, as good of a blocker as he is. But I think it makes sense to try to limit the situations in which he may have some pain, for sure.
Gene, it's draft season, not just NFL draft season, best ball draft season. You're looking at the Texans running back situation. At the moment that Dante Foreman went down with that Achilles, it seemed like he was taking control of that backfield and that Lamar Miller's role was going to be smaller. But as you indicated in the injury rounds, hope is that he'll have a chance to start training camp, may start training camp on the PUP. So for folks that are putting together their best ball board, would you fall more on the side of saying probably another year for Lamar Miller, or at least early in the season? Or do you think Foreman can pick up where he left off by the time the season starts?
Yeah, there's not a good comp aside from Arian Foster if you're going to count him. And I don't think we really would have ever known exactly how his rehab was going to go because of all the other soft tissue things. He just never made it long enough to be able to show us. But there was some hint that his recovery was going well enough. But the list of other running backs before him that have suffered Achilles injuries and come back to play really is really low. So, and we're talking about some relatively high draft picks with Mikel LeSure and a few other players. You can go back to Kendall Hunter, and there's a number of others as well. And they just haven't made it the same. Now, whether that's because there's something inherent to the running back position, and I don't know that you can make that argument, because we've seen wide receivers be explosive off the line of scrimmage, a number of them from Demaryius Thomas to Michael Crabtree to others. We've seen a number of edge rushers come back to full strength and better. We've seen some linebackers do it now, and some relatively older linebackers where they've recovered their former level of explosiveness. So it stands to reason that the running back position should be able to tolerate that as well. So, maybe then it has to do with, it's such a glut, and, you guys have been talking about this with the last 2 or 3 running back classes. There's so many good players out there that if you lose a fraction of a percent of what made you who you were, there's so many other players out there competing for reps and depth chart opportunities and all that sort of stuff. You get passed by so quickly that you don't have an extra year to recover if that's what you need. And this injury happening in November, thinking that it's almost always a 9-month recovery or so, you just wonder how much Foreman is going to be able to do during training camp. And if that's the case, then you're sort of stuck on the depth chart. And with all the turnover and the injuries, maybe you get a chance at some point during the middle part of the year. I think we're going to learn what Houston's level of concern with Foreman is, depending on how they approach the running back position through the draft. Now, they didn't do a lot in free agency, but there's so many good running backs in this draft class that if they make one a priority a little bit earlier, knowing the depth that's in the class, that probably tells you that they have more concern with Foreman or just want to make sure that they've got enough depth to get through the season. But I would err on the side of thinking that 2019 is a more reasonable time frame for him. Not that he couldn't recover to be productive at some point this year, but it's a race against the clock for him to be expecting to be productive for week 1 this year.
And Matt, you're up. Or is Matt frozen? He's awful still.
Yeah. Somebody check on Matt.
We will get Matt Waldman back in action. There's the bird. The bird is the word. The crow returns. Matt, are you there? Can you hear us? Okay. Well, Dr. Jene, your rounds are done early. We appreciate your time, brother. Great to have you back. And throughout, any time that you can join us this offseason is always a welcome addition. And we certainly appreciate you, brother.
Yeah, looking forward to it. I'm going to go back and put my head back in the RSP. I can read it as a fan rather than some of the editing stuff I get. I'm so lucky. I start seeing at the beginning of March, and I get to read what his thoughts are and everything else. So I'll get my head back in that to get prepared for a couple of weeks from now. So,
there he is,
Dr.
Jene Bramel at Jene Bramel on Twitter. Bloom, do you believe the Lamar Jackson stuff about the Patriots? And listen, Mike Freeman is one of the best. This isn't like Mike Freeman's making it up. Mike Freeman's one of the best. There's no doubt. There's no question. But anytime new information comes out at this time of year, I always go, why? And why didn't we hear this earlier? Now, in January and February, I did hear they liked Rosen, but I also heard the sentiment was, they like him, but there's no way they can get him. Now maybe they can with 2 first-round picks in that Brandon Cooks trade. So the report about Lamar Jackson, they being the most interested team, it sounds great, and Lamar Jackson will be a first-round pick. He will be a quarterback, and maybe he will be a New England Patriot, but the Patriots are incredibly tight-lipped, and most information comes from agents. Lamar Jackson doesn't have one. So what's to make of this Lamar Jackson news?
Yeah, I think that we can look at it from does it pass the sniff test? The Patriots would be interested in Lamar Jackson, and
yes,
absolutely it does. It makes sense. Bill Belichick is never at rest. Bill Belichick is always evolving, and I think that Belichick understands what you can do if you leverage Lamar Jackson's not just athleticism as a runner, but he's a legit playmaker. Much like we said about Michael Vick, I would have said that Michael Vick was the most dangerous open field runner in the league, not the most dangerous quarterback in the open field, just the most dangerous from the open field. Lamar Jackson might not rise to that level, but he's going to create a lot with his legs, not just threaten a defense. But as you said, what we really have to narrow our focus to right now, and as you call it, the lying season, why is it getting out? Why would it get out? This also goes to this, all of a sudden, a bunch of different people saying Cleveland's going to take Josh Allen. And even our good friend Lance Zierlein said, well, I'm not saying it's not true, but why it's clearly being pushed out there.
Well, and it was out there early. I thought the Darnold stuff, Bloom, and we can go back and forth on this. I thought the Darnold stuff was kind of the made up stuff because the Allen stuff's been there since January.
Right.
And then Sam Darnold, you had, of course, sitting next to the parents, right? And then all of a sudden, Sam Darnold, number 1. I'm like,
Right.
Okay. And Scott McLuhan loves Baker Mayfield. Now, I don't think Baker's number 1 overall, but let's just say this. There was strong indications from people in the know that they were going to take Saquon Barkley number 1. The Jets moving to 3 changed that.
Right.
So, well, that's a debate we'll get into. Matt, I want you in on this Lamar Jackson thing before we get back to the Allen thing.
Go ahead. I want to insert on the Jackson thing. So one of the ways that, I mean, it's fun to do the speculation of like, why would they be doing it? Why would the Browns be putting misinformation out about who they're going to take number 1? Maybe they want to induce someone to trade up to number 2. Why would the Patriots be putting misinformation out about player interest? I wonder if they're trying to get the Bills to commit early to move up. And that's a fun game to play. But I do think, and this is something that either of you can chime in on, when we see teams take visits, like I think that, the Jets staff just went down to Southern California to work out Sam Darnold, right? They don't do that as some part of an elaborate ruse. Teams don't move their decision makers around the country, put them on flights, spend time with players just to try to fake somebody out. And there was a picture of Lamar Jackson at Logan Airport. And if we do find out that he visited the Patriots, then I think the interest is real. And I think that we should take those actions as what little truth there is at this time of year.
Matt Waldman is at the sniff test. I think Matt froze up again. So we'll continue on and we'll get Matt in.
Sorry,
as soon as we can. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. But when you look at this situation and back to the Browns thing, and I guess we'll continue the quarterback discussion here. Allen makes a lot of sense for them based on Tyrod and Drew Stanton, because Allen's going to need some time. And it's not necessarily the accuracy, Bloom. You and I haven't really gone through this as much as I want to, because Matt Ryan was a 60% passer in college. Matthew Stafford was like a 57% passer in college. So the accuracy issues, we get stuck on Jake Locker and, more recency bias. Yes. But when we go back and we look, okay, guys like Stafford worked through it. And in fact, in his first 6 years, he wasn't over 60% except one time. And, Matt Ryan, obviously, he's worked through it. Now, the biggest thing for me with Josh Allen is pressure, because he chucks it. I mean, as soon as he feels a bit of pressure, just chuck. And that's why his off-target percentage is god-awful. And that's where, when you look at advanced data, or just look at his throws, I mean, he is so overthrowing and underthrowing. It's not, just a little bit out of reach. The inaccuracy problems aren't by a little bit. They're by a mile. And why are they by a mile? Because he's not stepping into his throws. He's cleaned up his footwork. He was great at his pro day. But it's also just he sees pressure, feels it way too soon. Instead of sliding or gliding, he just back foot chucks it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I've observed that enough to say that it's a defining thing about his game, because I also see him eluding pressure and extending plays. I do see him creating functional space in a pocket, stepping up in a pocket, even making plays while making throws a la Roethlisberger while defenders are trying to pull him down, or up in his grill, like when he can't really step in to a throw or have to just use that arm talent and that arm strength. I've seen Josh Allen make a lot of bad decisions, but I don't see them stemming from being overwhelmed because his processor, like smoke comes out of his ears, or he's scared. He never looks panicked. If anything, a la Roethlisberger, you want to see him a little more scared of pressure. His clock. When I watch him, it reminds me so much of Roethlisberger under Bruce Arians, where either he escapes a pocket that is intact because he would rather square off with the defense outside of structure, or when he's in the pocket, he doesn't hear the alarm clock go off, and you just throw it. And of course, who was the offensive coordinator that got through to Ben?
Todd Haley,
who's the offensive coordinator for the Browns.
Haley. So
I don't know. I mean, I think we can all agree that the range of outcomes for Josh Allen is wide. So here's one of the things. I was just on with Matt Caracchio and Paul Perticchese. I'm sorry if I'm quarter Italian with Carmela Rosello as my grandma. I should be able to get those Italian names better than that. But anyway, my point is, one of the things I find really interesting about the Josh Allen discussion is you have the analytics crowd coming in and saying, for a quarterback to overcome these analytics. And I think you've done a tremendous job, Cecil, of pointing out Matthew Stafford and some other quarterbacks. And then, there's always the counterpoint. Well, Matthew Stafford's in the SEC. So in one breath, you'll say, well, for him to succeed with these analytic measures, he would have to be an extreme outlier. And then in the next breath, you hear talent evaluators saying some of the things about his game make him an extreme outlier in terms of talent. We'll see how it plays out. None of us really know for sure how it's going to play out. But I do think that in this case, because of Todd Haley and how he changed Ben Roethlisberger's game, maybe Cleveland might actually be a good place for him.
Matt Waldman joins us now. Matt, on the Lamar Jackson thing, Matt. I want to get your thoughts there. Does it pass the sniff test that Lamar Jackson, the Patriots could be the team with the most interest in Lamar Jackson?
Yeah, absolutely, because I think he's the best pocket quarterback in this draft class, even though the caricature is that he's a runner. Everything's Michael Vick, Robert Griffin, name a black running quarterback, and that's basically what it's going to be. And really what it is if you're going to compare him to anybody, you compare him to a higher end, more evolved Michael Vick, which is somewhere between Steve Young and Michael Vick. Because really, when you look at this, Michael Vick, when he was in Atlanta at the height of his Ron Mexico days, when everything was going great for him and before he got found out for what he was doing, Steve Young was brought there as a consultant. And Young was like, look, man, if you learn to tie your feet to your drops and you learn how to maneuver the pocket without dropping your eyes and making all these dramatic movements, I know that you're able to beat anybody, by just basically faking, spinning, juking, and getting out of the way of the pocket. But it's preventing you from being able to hit the easy progressions. It's preventing you from being able to buy time in the pocket and keep your eyes downfield and find the easy reads. And instead, you're having to do the hard work, which you make look easy. And it's dynamic and everyone loves you for it, but it's not making you a great quarterback. He didn't really care. He really didn't. And he knew it. And if you ask him, I bet he would tell you that. And, he ended up going to jail. And when he ended up back out of jail and Andy Reid had him, it wasn't like he made the transition overnight, but he was better in the pocket there. He still had issues being able to maneuver, keep his eyes up, really make controlled steps. He doesn't have quiet feet. He's got loud feet. When the defenders, that flash of a jersey comes, man, that head ducks down, he spins, big dramatic movement. He can't throw when, he's practically doing the splits to get out of the way somewhere. Exactly. So Cecil's doing great physical props here. We should do like the president thing with the, with the hearing impaired, when you look at it from this perspective, the best pocket year Vic had was his best year as a quarterback as a passer, and that was with Andy Reid. And even then it was too late. He had already spent way too many years with pretty much an ingrained way of doing things that he wasn't going to be the player he could have been if he had started early and worked the way that Young was able to work. And of course, Young had the lovely luxury of working behind, under Bill Walsh and behind Joe Montana for several years, or else he would have been worse than Michael Vick. And Michael Vick was a very good player, but he would have, Young might have been a bust, if he stayed in Tampa Bay. So when you look at it from that perspective, yeah, Bill Belichick looks at this and is like, okay, so I have a guy who's a strong pocket passer, who understands a pro offense. I know what Bobby Petrino can put out there because, heck, Tom Coughlin thought he was one of the best play callers in the NFL and had him as, with the Jaguars back in the day. He already handles shifts. He already does things that a lot of these quarterbacks don't do at the level that he did. And the tough stuff he does, all that emotional IQ, putting things together and being able to do, create something that's efficient and productive out of bad situations where you have to put all these skills together. He already does a lot of those things. A lot of these quarterbacks, you give them, if you ask them to do 5 separate things, or maybe 1 to 2 of those things together, yeah, they look good. And they may even have a broader range of skills than Lamar Jackson does on that level. But if you ask them to do it all at once, they self-destruct in comparison to him. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if they're looking at him and decide that, we know what he can do in the pocket. Give him a couple of years. We know he needs some time in terms of just getting the mechanics together. Who better than Brady? Because Brady wants to play as long as possible, and he's going to fight that off every chance he can get. But, Jackson's a guy that they have the luxury to be able to get. So I think it's a terrific fit, and it's an easier system to actually learn early on because it's the Erhard Perkins rather than all this heavy verbiage of the West Coast offense. So that's even better.
And Belichick could be setting things up for McDaniels. And to say, I'm going to go to a front office role or I'm going to retire, and here you go, Lamar Jackson, and you're welcome. When we look at Sam Darnold, Matt, I'm going to go back to you and Bloom. I'm going to get your thoughts here. We talk about floor and we talk about ceiling. And with Sam Darnold, everyone level of the floor, and he's 20, and oh my God, what it could be. But look where you get to start. Yeah, look where you get to start. All those damn turnovers. And the fact that he tries to make throws that he has no business trying to make. Also, Matt, he scares me because his mechanics, his feet, his hips, and his shoulders are hardly ever in sync and on his bad throws. His throwing motion is loopy. I know Byron Leftwich is taking a shine to him, literally, but we want to see that cleaned up. And here's the problem, Matt. He's not going to. It's already said that. And at his pro day, he still, looked like the guy that we saw in the Cotton Bowl that, was just absolutely confused. And speaking of confused and stuff Lamar Jackson can do that Sam Darnold has yet to master, watch him go up to the line of scrimmage and then do the check with me. Watch. Anyone out there, watch Sam Darnold, watch him go up to the line of scrimmage and then do this. Look over. He's looking over for the coaches to tell him what to do. Yeah. Instead of recognizing it, controlling the play, controlling the line of scrimmage, and getting up and going. So upside, yes. First round QB, yes. Floor, yes. And tools. There are times when Darnold looks like Ben Roethlisberger to me. But those other things really scare me, Matt. Not scaring the Broncos. I've heard that Elway's favorite guy is Sam Darnold, and that makes so much sense. Mm-hmm. Maybe not for the reasons people want it to make sense. But let's talk about Darnold. He scares me, Matt. Should he?
I think he should scare you no more than any other quarterback in this draft class, other than maybe Josh Rosen. But that would be for different reasons. For Rosen's off the field probably more than anything. And then, the decision-making part I think is a little bit overblown, because some people will say, oh, well, Josh Rosen makes some dumb plays at the end of the game, but he seems to have a plan, and it's more brazen of like, I know what I'm trying to do here. I just have hubris, and I think I can do it. Where some of these guys are like, I'm looking over to the right side of the field, and this is where I should be going, but for some reason that looks all hazy to me. Let me go to the left side where it's really well covered and end up throwing bad plays, and I think that there's some guys out there at the top of this board where there's a difference there. But when you take a look at Darnold, he doesn't read the underneath coverage very well at this stage, and the arm mechanics are probably never going to change. I doubt that they're going to change that a lot if he's resistant. And on top of the fact, even though that it does dip low, I think it gets the ball out fast enough. The bigger issue is the footwork, and that's going to have to change. He's going to, he's just he's the youngest quarterback in his draft class, and he's acting like the little kid who says, I don't like fish. I don't want to try it. He's kind of got that. He's kind of at the dinner table right now saying, I'm not going to change. I just want peanut butter and jelly. And he'll probably be, he's not crying about it at least. And, but at the same time, what's going to happen is he's going to realize that some of those throws that he tries to make with his feet parallel to the line of scrimmage aren't going to get where they need to go on time. And he's going to have enough opportunities where a coach is going to look at him and go, so when are you going to start working on this? Because the countdown for you to actually still have this job is, at about 2 right now. And it was at about 5, when I started the sentence. So, I mean, when it comes to that, he'll have to learn in a hurry. But I think those things are fairly easy to correct. It's just the question is, again, it comes down to this same thing we talk about week in and week out about the NFL. They're going to rush him in, expect him to do everything. They're going to overwhelm him. He's going to realize that, he's got all these things to learn. And is it going to take a hit to his confidence? Because the NFL is a performance industry. And if you've ever been on stage, you know that the pressure on stage is much different than it is in a rehearsal or in a practice or anything like that. And when you screw up on stage, it takes a big hit to your confidence, especially if you're younger and you're not used to that type of thing. And these guys, when they make mistakes and they win the game, 35-13, or they get to the bowl game and they've lost 3 games and, or 4 games and they still get a bowl game, they had a successful season. But there's, 8 million bowl games. I mean, it's not this way, but compared to the NFL, college football is a participation trophy sport of football compared to the NFL. Everybody gets in a bowl game, basically, if you're in a top college, group. So they're used to being rewarded for things that they're not going to get rewarded for. They're going to get punished for. And he's going to have to learn how to deal with that, even though he may think he sees that coming. The most astute answer we got this year was from Josh Rosen saying, they said, are you ready for this? He's like, no. He goes, but I'm just going to try my hardest, and, some teams are marking him off for being that kind of honest as that kind of person. But I don't know. I'd rather have someone go, some of the most honest people I know who I knew I could rely on were the type of people you go, how's it going? And they go, not so good, and just kind of And you're thinking, I don't even know you. And you're just saying that right off the bat. But you knew where you stood. And I think that with Sam Darnold, he's kind of a people pleaser. We've heard that over and over again, that he's a major people pleaser. He's coming out early, and it's going to be interesting if he gets all wrapped up in that immaturity thing of, what do people want to hear as opposed to doing what I'm supposed to do and getting through that thing. So if there's any quarterback, and I think I'm laying it on a bit thick, but if there's any quarterback that we need to question about maturity, it's probably going to be him. It's probably not going to be Josh Rosen, but they've got it completely, reversed here. So I think he's got a shot because I like what he does off platform. I think he sees a lot of things on the field pretty well when it's broken play time. And there's a lot of moments of just, there's some moments of beauty to his game, and he's a tough kid and he's got that good arm, but you do have to wonder about the reads, the footwork, and the maturity factor, and how much they're going to put on him early, and whether that will end up hurting him in the way that, it hurt Deshaun Kaiser in the wrong situation.
Speaking of that and answers to questions, Bloom, did you read the Josh Rosen interview with ESPN? Did you catch that one, Bloom?
I haven't read that one yet, no.
Okay. Well, Josh Rosen and his answer about well, Brady's got 6, I want 7. People are thinking of Deshaun Kaiser saying I got the body of Cam Newton and the brain of Tom Brady. But in that article where Rosen was so refreshingly honest, Bloom, where he's I'm not ready, but I'm going to try my damnedest. And, he's I'm not going to put words in my teammates' mouths, but, go talk to them. I'm sure they'll love me. Also, one thing that he said, and yes, they brought up politics. They brought up everything. You have to with Josh Rosen. And he was my dad, who was a friend of Obama, voted for Trump, donated to his campaign. His mom's a liberal feminist. So he's sees both sides. He takes in all things. He's educated and he asks questions. I don't think that's a bad thing, right? Hey, why is this smart guy asking questions? Get over there, dummy. America. Play your football. Shut up. But one of the best things that Josh Rosen said, Bloom, and he is my number one quarterback because mechanically I love watching him throw. It's pretty. And that's a word that's used a lot. Dane Brugler said that, I believe, Bloom, on the couch about Josh Rosen. But one of the most important things that he said, Bloom, was the fact that when you are a quarterback, he wants to develop a one-on-one relationship with each teammate to know how to best motivate. And we know through our lives and our histories of either managing people or being managed, I think the best bosses are those that know, okay, this guy can chew his ass. This guy, I got to be a little bit softer on. And then I got to motivate this guy this way. I got to mama cat this guy. You know what I mean? You just have different management styles for different people. And the more that I hear Josh Rosen talk honestly about everything, the more that I love him and the more that I guess other people don't, Bloom. Your thoughts on his management style, quarterbacking style, politics, everything.
Well, we have this continuum of these quarterbacks, and how long has it been, Matt, since you introduced the idea of in structure and out of structure? I think it's changed how we all talk about quarterbacks going forward, and we can think of that continuum as the in structure, out of structure, and they aren't necessarily negatively correlated. But I do think in this class, you have we can leave Lamar Jackson out because his running ability skews his evaluation. But for the 4, you have, I think, Baker Mayfield and Josh Rosen are more of the in-structure quarterbacks, and Sam Darnold and Josh Allen are more of the out-of-structure quarterbacks. And Josh Rosen and Josh Norris just put a mock out today that had the Bills trading up to number 4 to get Josh Rosen. And I can see that. I mean, if the Bills liked Nathan Peterman at all, then out of these 4, they probably like Josh Rosen. And Josh Rosen's the guy you want who is going to be able to take everything apart from the pocket. And it is just so smooth and so pretty. And I think that with the right coordinator, it put him in the spot that Jared Goff is in. He could make that, he would make that come alive even more than Goff does, but you put him in other spots and maybe he wouldn't. As far as so I'll be interested to see who drafts him from the perspective of the offense they want to place around him. But much more interestingly is this question about his management style. He's not even a millennial. I don't know what the term is now for the generation after the millennials, where he's not just questioning things, but he's almost bold or militant about that. He's not going to yield or bend to expectations of his personality. And what I like about this actually is it should be a clarifying process where good, the teams that, like you say, see some teams, the more they learn about him, maybe they don't like him. Good, don't take him, please. Don't ruin him. Don't bring him in and say we're going to tame him or break his spirit in a way to make him what we want. And teams that see that management style and see the nuance and the great articulation and specificity that he can, for how young he is, to really know himself and understand his role and understand the magnitude of the place that he's in, and understand what it means to say, no, I'm not going to be who you want me to be. No, I'm not going to answer this question the way that I know you want me to answer it because of something that I'll have to gain from it. I'm going to be who I am. And an organization that's attracted to that is going to be the best organization to maximize what he can do. So I think that he's done a real service for himself and maybe for all of us that enjoy watching good football to make it so that an organization that drafts him knows exactly what they're getting and wants that.
Concern about the injuries, Matt, with Josh Rosen. That's, to me, the larger issue. And he even spoke to in that interview about, concussions, which he's had some issues with. And he's like, I know what I'm doing to my brain and I know the price I'm paying to play this game. And it's something that, as we go forward and we learn more, this is just what's going to be. But with Josh Rosen, how much is that more of a concern weighed to personality issues?
I would have more concern about injuries than I would about his personality. And I don't have that many concerns about his injuries because, he was most worried about the shoulder and the surgery that he had, and it was exploratory, and they found that it wasn't a big deal. And that it wasn't anything that needed a major repair. So, he was healthy enough from that end. And we just have to understand that UCLA had a crap offensive line. They've had one since the Brett Hundley days, and it hasn't gotten any better. So he had to deal with some of that and fine. It was an experience, and he learned from that. And there's some good experience to come from how to deal with injury and how to handle that when you're a quarterback at a major school. In terms of the personality part, it always makes me laugh when I see this kind of stuff more and more because you hear this everywhere. It's just universal in any kind of workplace. You hear management say, we want the best and the brightest. We want leaders. We want people who take charge. We want people who take ownership. We want people who aren't afraid to ask questions. And they're full of crap because when it comes down to it, when they get someone who's going to take ownership, who's going to question, and do it appropriately, and be curious, and to want to know things that maybe they don't even know yet. But he expects that they should, and he's not trying to show them up. Now, if he's trying to show them up and be immature and be like the guy in the meeting that's always like trying to ask a question that everyone knows that the boss doesn't know, even the boss knows that, you're just being a jerk, and there's a time and place, I guess, for some people to do that. But really, I don't think that's what he was doing. I think he just really wants to know because he wants to be the best that he can be. But some coaches still have the mentality, that they fake it till they make it. I've heard this from people who've played in the league and at that position who basically said, there are a lot of coaches who say, yeah, I know that, or assistant coaches, yeah, I know this. And it's just because they know that they just got hired into a system that they don't know anything about. And they're just trying to fake it till they learn more about it.
Might want to write that down.
Yeah. And there's and so if Josh Rosen asks a coach a question that the coach doesn't know and it's in a meeting room, they might get put on the spot and they might feel a little threatened by that. And so there's some issues with that. And I'm sure he wasn't the most mature about some of those things either. But, again, he's in his early 20s. It looks like he's learned. But the thing is that these guys get threatened by that to some degree. The fact that North Turner wants to take his ball and go home rather than adjust his offense to help out Sam Bradford, who's come in, basically to try and save the season after Teddy Bridgewater gets hurt, is just telling that an old established, at one point might have been considered a Hall of Fame coordinator, maybe at one time, especially with his glory days in Dallas.
Cowboys. Yeah. Cowboys.
Yeah. Decides, I've had enough. I'm going to take my ball and go home. that just tells you about the mentality of the NFL is that, oh, I don't want someone, I don't want to change what I'm supposed to do. I don't want to do the extra, maybe to a certain extent. I don't want to really have to coach, on the level that coaching we thought is supposed to be, And so when you look at Rosen, he's really exposing more than anything the teams that have personnel in terms of leadership that talk the talk but don't really walk the talk. And if they get him paired with a team that walks the talk, that dude has a chance to be as good as any quarterback in the NFL. He's got to get rid of that disaster gene, as Steve Palazzo said on PFF, saying, which I always equate to. I say he's the boxer with the great technical acumen who wants to be the puncher at the end of the fight. And he sees an opportunity where he's a little behind, or he sees an opportunity where, maybe he's a little bit ahead and he can really put it away. And instead of throwing it out of bounds, taking the sack, throwing it away, whatever, he sees that across the field throw and he's like, I think I can make that. And he wants to throw the haymaker that Sam Darnold or Josh Allen will to prove that he can do it. And he ends up kissing the canvas, and it happens to him repeatedly. I went with Ryan Riddle to the BYU game when he was a freshman. And this is something that I saw him do repeatedly throughout his career after this. But at the BYU game, inside the 20, 2 times in that game, rolling to his right, decides to throw it across his body and gets picked off in the end zone. And he does this on third down in the fourth quarter, in the second half of games a lot, or repeatedly enough that you're like, wow, this is a pattern. He's got to. And it's just perverse. It's just more like, I think I can do it, because he has a plan. He's one of the best middle of the field throwers in this draft in terms of having a plan and reading the defense. But it's just one of those things where you're just have to go, look, Josh, you say all this stuff, grow up, dude, grow up and stop doing that, or I'm going to put you on the bench for a while. And I think he'll be done with that at that point. He's just stubborn. And sometimes really good players are stubborn in that way. It's like fighters. They say the best fighters are stubborn, and I think he's got a little bit of that in him.
Brett Favre, stubborn. That's for sure. A nasty, filthy game out there. Bloom, I just want to get the vibe from Draft Twitter. Now, you are, of course, embedded within Draft Twitter, much more so than I just look at my app replies. Yeah, the situation report with Sigmund Bloom. Anytime that I check in with Draft Twitter, and again, the way that I handle social networking is if you reach out to me, I'm going to respond. I'm not going to look at what everybody else is saying. That's just me. Doesn't make it right or wrong, whatever. But anytime I check in, I see how much hate is out there for Josh Allen, and I'm like, wow, Draft Twitter seems to hate him. So let's go over the stock report and what you're hearing and what the buzz is out there amongst the people.
Yeah, and some of the Draft Twitter is the wonderful people of Draft Twitter, and some of it is what leaches into Draft Twitter from sources. On the quarterbacks, I think that there is a massive Josh Allen backlash, not dissimilar from the Cam Newton backlash, where there are folks that are certain that he's going to be a terrible pick and sink the franchise that he's with. We'll see. I think whoever takes him, wherever he goes, he'll go in the top 2 most likely, or top 3. He's that's going to be met with a lot of derision, so he's going to have to deal with that. Because I think that what's great about this is that, but Cam Newton, I don't know that Draft Twitter and the social media reception of Cam Newton really filtered up to the Panthers fan base or the team. I think it will filter up, especially if it's the Browns. It will absolutely filter up. People saying, "I'll." If you're still a Browns fan now, I don't understand, but I won't be a Browns fan anymore. Sam Darnold, I think there's not a lot of divisiveness. I think I just saw Jeff Romer today say, I see like a better version maybe of Ryan Fitzpatrick. And that's about the most negative thing I've seen about Sam Darnold. I think most everyone agrees that he's that high floor prospect, even though he does have decision-making, some things that we talked about, maybe to question. Josh Rosen, I think everybody already decided a long time ago that they like him. And I actually think his problems, as Matt was saying, about trying to do things that he just shouldn't try to do, haven't been stated enough as a negative. And then you have Baker Mayfield that everybody loves. And every, if draft Twitter was voting, Baker Mayfield would go number 1. And maybe he still will. Mike Silver saying, don't think you know everything about who Cleveland's going to take 1 and 4. And Lamar Jackson, draft Twitter, of course, loves. What's more interesting to watch to me now, because these positions were pretty well staked out in January or February, and they've just been getting intensified, is some of the players that are trending up, the classic late risers. And late risers might just mean that we are updating our understanding of where they're going to go in the draft. But I would say that Darius Geis is a player at this point that where he was discussed with the Steelers. I know that the Eagles are having him for a visit. I don't expect him to still be there. And I won't be surprised if he goes as high as the 13th pick to Washington. I think that Detroit obviously is a team that would look at him. New England has the number 23 pick. That would be interesting. I think he's a player that maybe was out of the late first round early in the process and is now more of a mid first round pick. And in a draft without Saquon Barkley, we might really be fawning over him.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Especially 2016 Darius Geis. Harold Landry out of Boston College. Paul Pasqualoni, going back to my days at the Qs, he was the head coach when I was there, was a Boston College defensive coach. Now with Detroit, Matt Patricia's consigliere, if you will, coached Harold Landry, and there was a lot of talk, hey, maybe that's the fit for Detroit. They need edge rush presence. I don't think he's going to be there. I don't even know if he's going to be there for Green Bay, who a lot of people early in the process were saying, well, why not Green Bay? Why not earlier? I won't be surprised if we see him in the top 10. There's some injury questions, but the combination he brings from the edge, it's Von Miller-esque, not quite as perfect as Von Miller, but the burst, the bend, the speed to power, all those things, it's ideal. And we know that next to a quarterback, that's the most valuable commodity in the NFL. So I see Harold Landry and Darius Geis as players that were discussed maybe around the end of the first round, the last third of the first round. And now I won't be surprised, as you'll get to watch us in real time, be surprised or not be surprised. I won't be surprised if these are players that go in the top 15 now.
That's coming up in 2 weeks. Watch our Audible NFL draft show. I will try to check in from Dallas. Hopefully Jerry's World has some great Wi-Fi so I can jump on and join you fellas for just a quick second. And Matt Waldman joining us for this show. People need to get rookie scouting portfolio. You want to make your draft experience complete. Make sure you check out the RSP. Matt Waldman, RSP.com. Matt, appreciate you, man.
Oh man, love you guys. This is a great time of year, and all the intrigue is, I joke that the draft spin cycle is at its height right now. So, if you love that, this is the time of year. I'm just ready to see it all unfold.
It's going to be fantastic, and Sigmund Bloom will be leading the way. Bloom, appreciate you, my friend.
Yeah, it's always fun, and I think that we all learn a lot from each other, and we all enjoy each other, and that goes beyond the four of us, the three of us. It's a lot of people out there, and it's fun to just get to take this journey with everybody.
Yeah, and I just want to show everybody, this was the 1993 Fantasy Baseball magazine that once a year would put out a fantasy football magazine. And in the very first page, in the letter from the editor or whatever, he actually apologizes for doing a football magazine. He's like, sorry, we had to do this once a year, it's kind of thing, whatever, and we'll get back to baseball. But this was my first fantasy football magazine as I've been moving, and check out the new digs and a couple pair of my favorite Jordans, wing ones, and then bread 11s. And I've got more to show you. I'll get to put this up. Nice. Of course, this picture, these are all pictures I've drawn. So studio, going into the house, and just everything. It's been fantastic. Appreciate the journey from my brothers to you, the viewing audience, and the listeners on the Audible as well. We couldn't do this without you. As I knock my microphone over, we love and appreciate each and every one of you. And thank you all so much for listening, for watching, and enjoying what we do. So for the great Dr. Jene Bramel, fantastic Matt Waldman, stupendous Sigmund Bloom, I'm Cecil Lammey saying stay tuned and stay